Okay, Mr. Mayor, we are now live. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I will call the meeting to order. Welcome, everybody. Approval of the agenda. Would any member like to add anything to our agenda here tonight? Seeing nothing. The recommendation is that the agenda be approved as presented. Someone to move to put on the floor, please. Moved by Councillor Thompson, second by Councillor Sullivan. Is there any discussion on the motion before us? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, you take the vote, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I call your name, please indicate your vote. Councillor Carol Barfoot.
4.
Councillor Kathy Moore-Coburn.
4.
Councillor Paul Sutherland.
4.
Councillor Ryan Thompson.
4.
Councillor Grant Pringle is absent. Deputy Mayor Sue Carlton is also absent. And Mayor Dwight Burley.
4.
Thank you, and that carries.
Thank you. Moving on for agenda, declaration of community interest. You can clear anytime you see fit during the meeting. Announcements. As a committee, we would like to acknowledge the week of May 3rd to May 9th, the National Mental Health Week through the Canadian Mental Health Association, and May 4th to 8th is Province of Ontario Education Week. Thank you to both the Canadian Mental Health Association and all our teachers for the efforts in serving our community and students alike. Again, thank you. Moving on to the agenda, we're down to our public hearings. Certainty Heights Water Access Point. On our agenda this afternoon is a public meeting to consider the use of the Certainty Heights Water Access Point, in which the public is welcome to provide their feedback to committee and township staff. For the public's information, at their meeting on September 2nd, 2020, Council voted to close the Certainty Heights Water Access Point to motorized vehicles. At their subsequent meeting on September 16th, 2020, Council moved to reconsider said closure and direct the staff to prepare a report regarding additional options at Certainty Park, including financial impacts for consideration at a future meeting of council. Feedback provided by the community, both through the online survey and through this public meeting, will inform staff recommendation to committee at their meeting on June 9th, 2020. As stated during previous discussions regarding this matter, I have on occasion visited the access point to draw water from the bay for agricultural purposes. Upon consultation with the Township Integrity Commissioner, I've been advised that my minimal use of the access point in question does not preclude any participation nor voting on this matter due to the infrequency of said use. While I wish to highlight this use for means of transparency, I would like to further assure the public and members of council that my use of this access point will not influence my vote. Members are welcome to participate in the clerk. Madam Clerk, just to confirm my numbers, I believe there's 8.
There is 9.
9, sorry. Members of the public registered to participate and will be provided 5 minutes to submit their comments to committee. Prior to welcoming our residents to speak, I will invite the Township Director of Operations to provide comments. Mr. Dolmer, please go ahead. Steve, you there?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Operations staff have engaged the community to gather feedback regarding the use of Certainty Heights Water Access Point. As highlighted by the chair, staff created and advertised an online survey on March 28th, 2021, which remained active through to April 26, 2021. A total of 184 responses were received online, with an additional 10 responses received in hard copy. Notice of the survey and public meeting was mailed directly to the residents of the Sertaki Heights area on March 31st, 2021, published in the local newspapers, uploaded to the township website, and shared on social media, Facebook and Twitter. As we continue to embrace the principles of accountability and transparency here at the township, staff will review all responses to the survey and feedback provided during this public meeting. Please note that tonight's public meeting is simply to gather feedback from the committee or community, and that no final decision will be made this evening after the public meeting. Staff will then present a report regarding the use of Sertaki Heights water access point, including the financial impacts of associated recommendations at the June 9th, 2021 meeting of Committee of the Whole. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Dolmer. I will now welcome residents to speak in order of their registration with the clerk. As a reminder, you will have 5 minutes to make your comments. The clerk will provide you with a 1-minute warning at the 4-minute mark, should you need it. Madam Clerk, I would like to turn this over to you, and you go through the restrooms in order, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our first speakers this afternoon are Greg and Christine Gard. Greg and Christine, please go ahead. And Mr. and Mrs. Gard, you are muted.
Good. Thank you. Thank you for allowing us a few minutes to provide our feedback directly. We've also completed the online survey. And just to give you some context about where we're situated, we live approximately 100 yards directly west of the access property at the top of the pedestrian path between Presqu'île Road and Sutakriti Street. We wish to make the following point. My husband's.
Yeah, I'll take over from here. So we strongly disagree with the council decision to permanently close the Sutakriti access point to vehicles. Our disagreement is based upon our concern for water user safety should police, fire services, or neighbors need to respond to somebody in an emergency situation on the water. As you likely know, this stretch of bay between Gray Road 1 and Cobble Beach is busy in the summer months with people enjoying the water. This is especially true when the Rotary Youth Camp is in use in July and August. It's our opinion that not being able to back a boat trailer into the water at the Sutakriti location to assist in a water emergency would seriously jeopardize a timely rescue. On a personal note, we have adult children who sometimes paddleboard from the Sutakriti access property. We are concerned about their water safety if the Sutakriti water access property is closed to vehicles. As far as we know, Balmy Beach and Big Bay are the next closest public boat launch sites, and they are both very long and emphasize very long boat rides from Sutakriti. Our observations and experiences indicate that very few vehicles actually ever use the water access property, and we're not aware of any factual examples surrounding safety at this property in our time here. We do not understand how this became a problem for council to close access to vehicles at this property. In conclusion, for community safety purposes, we hope a compromise can be reached to avoid permanent closing the Sutakriti access property vehicle. We think this makes good sense for everyone. Thank you for allowing us opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Gard. Does council have any questions on the presentation? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, please go ahead. For next resident.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our next speaker is another couple, Tracy and Robert Schill. Tracy and Robert, please go ahead. You are muted.
Hi, yes, thank you for allowing me a moment to speak. We're fairly new to the area, and you know, we find it's very quiet down there. So we agree with Christine and Greg in the sense that we're not quite sure where this is coming from, that they would consider closing this access. We've noticed a few small boats in there. We've noticed a few people, you know, going out in canoes and kayaks and whatnot, but we haven't noticed, you know, masses and masses of trucks and trailers lining up on the road that would be causing any kind of issue or safety issue. You know, we would also like to have a compromise. You know, we hope it doesn't get closed. We think it's a wonderful, unique feature of this small neighborhood here. You know, and if there is a way that we can come to a compromise so that everybody's happy, then we're happy to have discussion about that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tracy. Does the committee have any questions of Mrs. Shield? Madam Clerk, I see none. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our next registrant is Miss Dorothy Mitchell. Miss Mitchell, would you like to submit any comments?
No, I have no comments at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Mitchell. Our next registrant is Mr. David Lawrence. Mr. Lawrence, please go ahead. And as a reminder to unmute yourself, select *6 on your keypad.
Thank you. Am I audible?
Yes.
Hello.
Yes, you are.
Okay, thank you. All right. Thank you for the opportunity of addressing council here. It's something that I appreciate, the fact that democracy is still alive in this part of the world. And one of the things that I would like to suggest here is the future of the park long term. I think for some extent we're more interested in the short term or near future as opposed to the length of time that that park should and probably will be kept in place. Like we know, for example, that there is a tremendous amount of development happening in our area, which I think will continue to accelerate some of the needs of that park being there for the people to use. In addition to that, we have a great county, I guess, posting signs to have people come down on the water view trail and view the water view from our Presqu'île Road, if you will, predominantly. And so this is something that I have done a bit of a straw poll in the summertime last year, just going to ask people where they're from, just out of idle curiosity. And it was my experience that during the peak summer months, that the majority of people are not from, say, Sutacrity Park or from Georgian Bluffs or even from Ontario in some instances, that the majority of people were actually coming from outside of our immediate area, the ones that are affected. And this is something that I guess is not necessarily taken into consideration in the long-term element of what can and probably will continue to put pressure on that particular part of our park area per se. The other thing is that one of the things that people I think are disregarding in many respects is that there are 4 properties located on Presqu'île Road that are in the Sutacrity Park subdivision from its original conception. Those 4 properties are the ones that are most significantly impacted by any of the decisions made by council as to what to do with that particular property and how to use it. So we're very concerned that no one from the municipality, either as an employee or a council member, has come to address our concerns directly. And it's not something that a lot of people would give necessarily a potential thought to, because what are the problems on it? There are some things that, of course, we're quite concerned about, and I think that I would like to take that up individually or collectively with the 4 property owners down here to express our concerns. And one of the other things here that we need to take into consideration is the fact that no one is against having people enjoy that area. We are all blessed having that opportunity to be able to enjoy something that a lot of people living in apartment buildings in Toronto, for example, don't even have a balcony, and we have opportunities to enjoy it here, and so we should. The other thing to take into consideration is that all other areas that are boat launch areas or some similar type park circumstances that we have here at Sutakriti Park is the fact that we have areas that are designated as recreational areas as well in other parts of the community. We have a park and a playground with the equipment down there, playground equipment, and even washrooms involved with that, but no boat launch. We have a boat launch area that is large enough to have other areas take place with that, okay, in that vicinity, and that's predominantly, if you will, Big Bay. I think everyone's probably familiar with that particular area. We also have a boat launch area that's used exclusively for boat launch and is not designed for recreational elements at all. So we have a circumstance here that I think is very unique in relation to what the community at large is taking into consideration. Greg's points are well versed, and I think that there is some due diligence that has to be looked upon at that point. However, I would like to suggest that rather than looking exclusively at this for our water access point, that there's other properties along Presqu'île Road that are ideally suited for having a boat launch and or water access, and more so than what our park right here is, our park access is. And those areas, I think, are something, for example, if you look at the property right beside the Presqu'île camp, okay, there's an area where there's a trailer there. Last summer, the owner of that property posted a sign out front that's for sale. That particular property is ideally suited for boat launching and or water access, if you will. Much more so than having the proximity.
Apologies for the interruption, but you have reached your 1 minute warning.
Okay, thank you very much for giving me that information. Okay, so I think what we need to do is to look at what size the boat is going to be able to use that facility. 16-foot, 25-foot, open fishing boats, cabins on them, etc. What about parking? Hey, there's no parking designation area whatsoever. So if you have people who have got their boats in the water, where do they park the boats that they brought their boat on? Maintenance of area. How many people are going to sit there and take responsibility for the cleanliness of that area, cleaning up after people who have gone into the water, come back, throw their beer bottles around if that's the case or whatever else? We also need to take into consideration what are the liabilities of that particular facility being used by people, not just in Georgian Bluffs, but outside of our community, people as far away as what I found out last summer, coming from beyond Quebec City. So I think that there's more to take into consideration of just the convenience of having a water access there. There's much more that needs to be taken into consideration, and I'd appreciate it if the council would do so. Thank you for the time to listen to me.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. Does the council have any questions of Mr. Lawrence at this time? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our next registrants are Mark and Kathy Vincent. Mark and Kathy, please go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Our feelings are right along with Greg, mostly as a safety issue for boaters. It can be even some of the young kids that are down there using it as a swimming place if they're out in inflatable toys or anything like that. Wind catches them, blows them offshore. Quickest way to get there is going to be by boat and not coming from town or one of the other boat launches, which can be quite some distance. We use it for launching an inflatable boat, and we also use it for kayaks, where if we had to carry them too much further, we probably wouldn't be using them. That's our basic complaint. Our other thought would be if it is going to be used as a park with swimming, somebody mentioned the safety for people down there. There's never been all along, even like say a life ring to throw out if there was a swimming accident or something for, or even 911 signs to call in case of emergencies. So even if it's for public use without boats, I think it should be maintained. At least there is some type of safety set up in place. That's it for us.
Mr. Mayor, you are muted.
Sorry, Madam Clerk. Does council have any questions of Mark? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our next speaker is Miss Connie Harkness. Connie, please go ahead.
Yes, hello. I just wanted to say, like, we live right across from the water area in discussion. And just to give you an idea of what we have to put up with the little launch ramp area that's there now, there's fishing boats that launch at 5 or 6 in the morning, and their headlights shine right into our bedroom window. And they also take their boats out late at night at 9 or 10. This doesn't happen all the time, but maybe 2 or 3 boats during the day sometimes. And we've even had boaters that pull right into our driveway to back straight down into the ramp. And there's not too much room for parking, so the overflow of trucks and trailers, including cars from people launching kayaks and canoes, etc., get parked on the street in front of our house. And we bought this property 16 years ago to see the water and not cars parked in front of us. The launch ramp that's there, the area for swimming, is adequate now. We don't want any expansion of the launch ramp because there's just no place for parking. And another problem with down there is people bringing their dogs. People park out front, they open the door and a dog runs out and they go down and run around there. The owners may be talking to other people. The dog's doing his business and nobody sees where he's doing this. And someone's already put a sign up down there to clean up after your dog. People are walking their dogs down there in the area, but they're on leash and they usually stay on a leash. It's the people from outside the area that think that this is a dog park. And also there's a water leakage problem down there that needs to be fixed. I'm sure that you're all aware of that. And like Dave was saying, like the 4 properties along here, nobody's ever come to us and asked any of our opinions. So instead you put a survey out to anyone. And of course they're going to want a launch ramp down there. But the bottom line is for us that it just stays status quo what it is, a launch ramp, the size it is, and some signage for dogs and whatever in the designated area. And we just don't need an increase in the launch area, but just to leave it as it is and just clean it up a bit with all the rocks that are thrown up there. Thank you.
Thank you, Connie, for your comments. Does council have any questions? Madam Clerk, I do not see any, so please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our next registrants are Wayne Cowell and Patricia Shutak. Wayne and Patricia, please go ahead.
Thank you. I believe I'm unmuted. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council, for allowing us to have a say in this matter. We have been here just over 4 years, and it's been our experience that we have a canoe which we launch from that water access area. It's been our experience that we have never noted a safety issue with anybody using that area, whether it was for children swimming or for people launching a boat it's interesting to note that because of the shoreline and the type of water and rock that are there, it's impossible to launch a large boat. The only boats we've seen there are personal watercraft, canoes, kayaks, and inflatable boats, small fishing boats. That's all we've seen there. And we've never seen, perhaps we haven't been down there at the right time, but we've never seen a lineup of traffic or vehicles that have either launched or are waiting to launch in that area. So I guess our recommendation would be, as others have said, to leave it as it is. The concern for safety, if there is no boat launch, is what Greg Gard has brought up very aptly. That if the OPP or a boat has to be launched for rescue in any sense, there is you can't deny access to the boat launch area. All right, I guess one of our main concerns is how this whole issue unfolded. We're very concerned that, first of all, I'd like to thank the council for their transparency in the fact that they did send out a survey subsequently, but it seemed to be a little backwards because the council made a decision before that happened. Our concern is that as residents, we're on Macintosh Drive, we were not informed of any of the permission to clean up the area, concern about safety of the boat launch area. No one contacted us, and talking to our immediate neighbors, they were also not aware of any issues. So I guess that's our main concern, is how this all unfolded and what permissions were given and to whom. I think that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Wayne. Does council have any questions? Madam Clerk, I do not see any. Do we have any other participants, or was that it?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of notes for the public record. We did have a registration request from Miss Jane Fritz. Jane is not on the line currently, so she will not be speaking. And this afternoon, I did receive a voicemail from an area resident, being Mr. Harold Sutherland. While Mr. Sutherland and I did not connect in time for him to participate in this meeting this evening, he did wish to express his support for keeping the boat launch open, the access point open, specifically for purposes of fire suppression and water collection purposes.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I would like to thank all our speakers and to those that participated in the online survey. All feedback received will inform staff report to committee on June 9th, 2021. So that finishes our public meeting. I'll move forward with our agenda. Our next item on the agenda is a presentation from our Principal Integrity Periodic Report. And we have Commissioners Jeffrey Adams and Janice Atwood. And Janice, I gotta apologize. I have no idea how to pronounce your last name, and I apologize beforehand. So I really don't want to try to attempt to say it, so I'm just going to leave it as Janice Atwood. So I'm going to turn the floor over to whoever, either Jeffrey or Janice, please. Go ahead.
That will be me, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much. Thank you all, and good evening to everyone. Mr. Mayor, though we were off to a little bit of a rocky start, we've been your integrity commissioner since February of 2019. This report covers a 2-year period approximately. We're happy to say that this report represents what we think is a good news story. Certainly from our perspective, we're not hearing the same sorts of things we heard at the beginning of the tenure. That tells us that our association is working. Council, of course, is well aware of our role, but for the benefit of the public listening or viewing this evening, just give me if you would, just a moment to describe the broad role of an integrity commissioner. We, of course, are in place to assist our client councils with ethical policy development. That means assistance in adopting or revising codes of conduct or other policies that might govern ethical behavior. We provide education and training related to ethical behavior, sometimes on governance matters. On request, we provide advice and opinions to members of council or members of local boards on things related to the Code of Conduct or the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. We can do the same with respect to requests that are sent our way from council. And we also provide a mechanism to receive and deal with what the Act calls inquiries. Complaints is what they're known by most of us, where there's an allegation of a breach of ethical responsibilities on both code or policy or municipal conflict of interest matters. And we work to resolve those complaints to the best we can, or certainly to resolve them in the public interest. But where it's in the public interest to do so, we investigate, we report, and we make recommendations to council within our statutory framework, guided by procedural fairness, the code, policies, and protocols. So we think the proper view of an integrity commissioner is not to consider us the cop or the sheriff, but as a coach or a teacher focused on enhancing any municipality's ethical culture. And that's how we carry out our role. One special feature of our role is confidentiality. There is a statutory cloak of confidentiality around most of the things we do. Now, when we report out on an investigation, we do so in a public way. But when a member asks for advice or we provide education and training, typically that occurs in a closed session setting. Members' advice request to us, the advice we give is absolutely confidential. That's confidential as between the member and ourselves. Mr. Mayor, with respect to our activity since we began as your integrity commissioner, we have provided training on 2 occasions. The first was a general training on codes of conduct, municipal conflict of interest, integrity commissioners, that sort of thing, an orientation presentation. And then in October of 2020, we had a more specific training with you on code of conduct and matters associated with it. And we've also provided advice, as I mentioned. The advice we provide is confidential, as between the member and ourselves. And during the period covered by this report, we've done so on three separate occasions. Now, with respect to complaint investigation and resolution, as mentioned, at the beginning of our tenure, there was a backdrop of some significant change in the township's administration. There were challenges that were played out on the council floor. At times, things were suggested to us that things were getting out of hand, and we were able to resolve complaints that came our way, typically without the need for a report and certainly without the need for a public sanctions report. We did make recommendations on the carrying out of training, and that, as I mentioned earlier, has been done, and we think that training was quite helpful to you. So that, Mr. Mayor, is our activity with respect to the municipality. When we do our periodic reports, we like to just share what we know about developments in the field from across the province. So the comments that I make now are general comments, not specific comments about Georgian Bluffs. One area of probably the most significant advice request we get is with respect to conflicts of interest. But you may well be aware of the judicial inquiry that occurred in Collingwood. The report was issued by Associate Chief Justice Morocco in November of last year. That report contained a discussion regarding the rules relating to conflicts of interest that go beyond your obligations under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, which has a very narrow focus on something that is described as pecuniary interests. It's never defined in the statute. And a very narrow class of family members that is described in the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. The Associate Chief Justice's report acknowledged that there's also a broader concern that you will need to be aware of, your obligations under the common law, and there is a broader class of conflict of interest that is applicable to members of council. And your code of conduct does have a broader set of family members that are included in your responsibilities, though the code doesn't provide a great deal of guidance as to how you should be dealing with them. The code does say that you have an obligation to follow both the letter and spirit of the legislation, but spirit is undefined, and that's a rather open-ended obligation. Nevertheless, we are available to assist you in interpretations. Looking around the province, respect and non-disparagement or disparagement are certainly issues that crop up in a variety of places. You may be aware that the province has announced and has begun consultations on codes of conduct. There seems to be a focus in that regard on behavioral concerns and what to do with members of councils who engage in harassing and bullying behavior. That seems to be the focus, although we'll be making contributions to the consultations on both that and on other matters associated with codes of conduct. But simply put, members need to be aware of the things they do, how they say or communicate with others, whether it's orally or in writing or in social media. There is a responsibility to be non-disparaging as you do that. Another theme frequently around the province is the situation where a member may fail this, what we call stay in their lane. In other words, where they creep into operational issues or attempt to speak on behalf of the whole of council without participating in the deliberative process which council represents. So that's essentially the highlights of what we're seeing around the province. As I say, we consider this report to be a good news story. We're happy with the outcome, and we certainly look forward to working with your staff and yourselves as we carry out our work as your integrity commissioner. So, Mr. Mayor, Janice and I are both available. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to address them.
Thank you, Jeffrey and Janice. Janice, any comments before I turn it over for council for questions?
No, Jeff covered it all, and we're quite happy, as he said, with the progress at this point.
Thank you, Janice. Does council have any questions of our integrity commissioner? Well, on behalf of council, Jeffrey and Janice, we really appreciate you being our commissioners and look forward to working with you in the future. Again, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your presentation. It's great to have a team like you guys on our side.
Happy to help. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Okay, council, I'll move on with our agenda. We're down to our delegations. We have 2 delegations this afternoon. As a reminder to our delegates, you will be provided 10 minutes to submit your comments to the committee. The clerk will provide you with a 1-minute warning at the 9-minute mark, should you need it. We ask all delegates to remain parliamentary and respectful in their submissions to the committee. Per the Township Procedural Bylaw, council may ask questions of the delegates, but shall not engage in the debate with the same. To begin, I would welcome Mr. Russ Pearson and Mr. Kevin Lindy to speak regarding safety on Gray Road 17B. Mr. Pearson, please go ahead. Are you there?
Yes, Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm Russ Pearson, and I'm, yes, I'm going to pass the torch over to Kevin Lind, my neighbor here. Kevin is also present, and if he wants to unmute himself, he'll walk you through the presentation.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks, Russ, and thanks to the council for letting us speak this evening. I anticipate that you all have had sufficient time to review the short presentation as well as some of the petitions and stories that a number of the residents in the area have provided. But in the interest of time, I'd like to go through the presentation only. So we're here to discuss lowering the speed limit on Grey Road 17B to 50 kilometers an hour. We appreciate that this is a county road and the decision ultimately isn't yours, but we'd like your support before presenting to Grey County at the end of the month. And this is really about keeping our roads safe, plain and simple. If you flip to slide 3 here, we've outlined where we'd like to see the speed limit lowered to 50 kilometers. Much of the traffic that uses 17B uses it as an alternate route to Highway 6 and 21 to travel in and out of Owen Sound, or as a bypass for travelers headed to and from Saddle Beach and Tobermory. If you flip to the next slide, this is what we're dealing with. So last year, the OPP set up a traffic monitoring system to collect volume and speed data on 17B, and we see an average of 5,000 vehicles a day on this road. And here's the disturbing part. So almost half the vehicles are speeding. And to get from one blue star to the other on that map there, the difference is 700 meters. So the travel times are approximately equal whether you use 17B or Highway 6 and 21, but by dropping the speed limit to 50 kilometers an hour, it would help divert traffic to the highway, where this volume of traffic should be traveling, quite frankly, and not on a rural county road. If you flip to the next page, here are some things to consider. So with almost half the cars going through 17B speeding, there's no question that we can prevent future accidents by lowering the speed limit. There's too much going on this road for cars to be traveling not only at the existing posted rates, but at higher speeds. There have been at least six serious accidents in the last 20 years that have required EMS. And with the volume of traffic increasing, doing nothing is only going to cause more accidents. My property is adjacent to the Bruce Trail and the conservation area, and because of COVID, I mean, I've been working from home since March of last year, and there's never been so many cars parked in the parking lot at the top of 17B that more than I can remember. It's a small lot, maybe 4 cars can comfortably get in there, and there's overcrowding with cars parked along 17B. It's a blind lot at the top of the hill. The Bruce Trail also exits onto 17B, literally on the crest of the hill, and the tree line there is maybe 20 feet from the road. So in the summer, when the twitch grass is growing, it grows, call it a meter high, and it reduces the visibility further. Both for motorists and hikers who often end up on the shoulder of 17B walking back to the parking lot. And as I mentioned, Russ and I both live on the corner lots that abut 17B, and this street should have probably never been there in the first place at the top of the hill, but it kind of is what it is. And without edging out onto 17B, you can't really see down the escarpment. So with almost half the motorists speeding, there's little reaction time to merge with traffic. It's incredible how many times I've had to reverse back onto West Street because 1 second there's a car there and the next there's another car racing up the hill at excessive speed. So, you know, that's another point, and let's not overlook like the fact that there's a lot of wildlife that goes in and over between the conservation area and quite frankly my property. Like there's turkeys, there's deer, there's coyotes, there's no reaction time for somebody speeding to safely slow down to let that wildlife cross the street. And another important point to make is like as we get into the summer weather, like we can't forget that 4 to 5 months a year we have snow on the ground, and the driving conditions at Grey County in the middle of winter can be dangerous at the best of times. So one of the residents who signed the petition supporting the lower speed limit talks about how they get 20 plus cars a year in his ditch because or in his driveway because most of the time they're speeding. Like even at my place, turning left going down 17B into town, turning left on the West Street, cars have ended up in Russ's ditch, and I've had to help push them out. And we're talking like a basic left-hand turn. And that's because people are speeding. They don't have enough time to slow down to turn onto West Street. The last couple of points on this slide are equally as important, maybe the most. I mean, we have a ton of non-local motorists using 17B as a bypass to get to Salvo Beach and Tobermory. And why are they using that? That's because Google Maps and Waze, the apps that people, the traffic apps, they use algorithms to get their user from point A to point B in the most efficient way. And that's why they're using 17B, because it's marginally faster to go from one blue star to the other, and lowering the speed limit will help mitigate these algorithms and divert traffic back to the highway. Needless to say, Google Maps does not let their users know that there are blind parking lots, hidden driveways, the Bruce Trail, wildlife crossing. So we need to work within the system to guide non-local motorists to use the highways, not rural roads. It's only a matter of time that someone is critically injured or we see a fatal accident on this road. There's upcoming work this summer on 17B, which includes adding a 1.5 meter paved shoulder for a bike lane. It's part of Grey County's cycling and trails master plan. The scope of this work does not include widening the road or any tree removals, which means the net effect is that the lanes will be narrower and the sight lines will be unchanged. So when we already know half the motorists are speeding and we're adding a bike lane, which will encourage more pedestrian activity on this road, we need to take preventative measures to lower the speed, reduce the possibility of an accident. It's just common sense. So if you flip to slide 6, this isn't the reason why you lower the speed limit, but there is a residual benefit. By diverting traffic back to the highway, there are a ton of local businesses that need any and all the help they can get. Driving through commercial areas will drive more business into these locally owned business. And given the disruption that we've seen through COVID to businesses throughout the community, this is just an easy way to help these businesses out. But most importantly, it's helping keep the community safe. And if you flip to the next slide, some of the residents who signed the petition did a bit of work and presented this very valid and I think important message. The county and Georgian Bluffs signed on to this initiative back in December of last year. This is the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan. We're 5 months in. Page 1 of the introduction states, and I quote, levels of satisfaction among people residing in Bruce and Grey counties are comparatively lower for how well they feel the local government is responding to community needs, end quote. In fact, a priority risk area is crime prevention, and several comments in the local survey mention the concern about road safety issues. So here we are as residents asking our local government to respond to our community needs. It's time to show us that you're listening. And on slide 8, well, I would encourage you to read all of the notes in the petition that we signed. Here's a couple of them. One's not on there, but we have a resident whose daughter is afraid to go to the mailbox at the end of their driveway because of the speeding traffic. A couple of years ago, Susan Frook, a local resident, was almost hit by a car when she was walking her dog. The dog was killed tragically, and the driver was charged with careless driving. This is an example of what we're trying to avoid. And while Susan lost her dog, and I want to be respectful of that, there are families on this road, young families, myself included, and supporting us to drop the speed limit here is doing your part to help keep this area safe, because nobody wants an even more tragic situation. So we need your support. Dropping the speed limit down to 50 kilometers an hour is the right thing to do. And given the upcoming road work on 17B, we think it makes sense that upon completion, the new speed limits come into place, so that when motorists get back to using 17B, they realize that it's time to slow down. So on behalf of the residents of 17B, all the residents that signed and supported the petition on this initiative, thank you, Council, very much for your time, and I'm happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you, Kevin, for all your great comments. I'll now open it up to the committee. Is there any questions from the committee? Councillor Colburn?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And this is not a question for our delegation, but rather a question for council. This is potentially the most professionally done, data-driven presentation I've seen our residents make. They've done our homework for us, and I appreciate that. So what can we do at the county level to support this initiative? And as you, Mr. Mayor, and our Deputy Mayor are our representatives on County Council, I would ask that you take this forward on their behalf.
Thank you, Councilor Colburn. I understand that, Kevin, you're going to take the same presentation to County Council very soon.
Yes,
Am I
that's the
correct?
intent, is to take it by the end of the month.
Okay, and I really look forward to that presentation coming at the county level. Councilor Colburn, may I add a little bit more to your question in a moment? I'd like to have Mr. Dolmer, our Director of Operations, speak first.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Councilor Barfoot, can you wait just for a minute and I will let Steve comment first.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, Mr. Mayor, to the delegation here. I just want to thank the presenters for the delegation in regards to the Grade Road 17B safety discussion there. At this time, I feel that we should be forwarding this request to Grey County because it is a Grey County road. It's not a township road. It's maintained by Grey County. And Grey County, when they do these kind of reviews, they are looking at these kind of options of what is out there, because when it comes to a speed limit reduction, there are very variety of components that must be considered in the evaluation, and the county does do these quite a bit when the requests do come in. So I think it'd be best that you kind of forward this on to the county and let them kind of do the process properly.
Thank you, Steve, and that's exactly what I was hoping you would say. And going back to your question, Councilor Colburn, yes, we can forward this presentation to the county from Georgian Bluffs, but it's nice to see that Kevin is going to present at County Council too, and he's done an excellent. Him and his team has done an excellent job in presenting this, and I think it's well done. Councilor Colburn, I see your hand is up.
Just in follow-up, I understand that it's a county road and I understand they have a process, but I also understand that these are our ratepayers and our residents, and their safety and their concerns matter to us. So I'm asking our mayor and deputy mayor, when they take it forward to county council, to advocate on our ratepayers' behalf as much as is possible. Thank you.
And I can assure you, we will definitely both do that, Councilor Colburn. Before I go to Deputy Mayor Carlton, Carol, you want to go ahead, Councilor Barfoot?
I just want to mention one thing to Stephen. The traffic, this will impact somewhat the traffic on Girl Guide Road, which we already have a problem with speeding. And in the summertime, it is unbelievable the way they zip back the Girl Guide Road. I know I've lived back here 30 years and it's unbelievable. And just as a matter of interest, it's at all hours. At 4 o'clock this morning, 2 cars went racing up the road. I know this is an exception, but keep in mind, if you're diverting traffic, where's it going to go? We have to keep in mind other rural areas as well. Very well documented to the gentleman that put that together. Thank you very much, but sort of keep us safe on Girl Guide Road too. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Colburn. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Carlton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And through you to the presenters, I think excellent presentation. I use that road all the time because I live just out past it on the highway. So I agree with what you're saying. Lowering that speed limit there would make a huge difference. I also like the idea of lowering the speed limit and getting some of that Google traffic off that road, put it back out on the main highways where it should be. And I think if we lower the speed limit on that road, I don't think we'll see it divert to other municipal roads. I think we'll see it go back out onto the highways. The people that want to speed are going to speed. And so they're going to pick the highway, not another back road. I definitely will support this when it comes forward at County Council. So thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, Deputy. Good comments, and I did what you said too. Does any other committee member have any comments? See none. Thank you, Kevin, for your presentation, and Russ, very well done. And again, thank you. Look forward to see you at County Council.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. And just for clarity for the minutes and for our delegates, the minutes will reflect that this matter will be referred to the Grey County Council for their information.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So we're on to our second delegation this evening is Mr. Keith Davis speaking regarding the Campbell Community Center. Mr. Davison, please go ahead. Are you there?
I am here, Your Worship. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, am I ready to go?
Go ahead.
I couldn't hear you.
I said go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry. So good afternoon or good evening, Mr. Mayor and Madam Deputy Mayor and councilors and Mr. CAO and Madam Clerk and staff. On the evening of April 8th, both Councillor Kathy Coburn and Madam Clerk Brittany Drury informed me that a news release had just come down through our MPP, Bill Walker, that Georgian Bluffs was the recipient of a grant of $678,000 from the feds, $554,000 from the provincial government, and $452,000 was coming from Georgian Bluffs for the Campbell Community Center. I was overjoyed and did an emotional happy dance. Ever see an old man do a happy dance and cry at the same time? I could not believe that Campbell was going to be the recipient of $1,695,000 to build a new community center. What a gift horse. Beautiful. Brittany had told me 2 days before the announcement that she and the operations manager were out visiting the site at the Campbell Athletic Field, the location I had proposed for a new build family center. The next morning, I found out that things were not as I had first perceived. And in communication to Brittany, I said, it looks like they are going to retrofit and rebuild our old barn of an arena into a community center instead of building a brand new community hall, family center, community center that I had been advocating through my left out document for the Recreation and Trails Master Plan. And I said to Brittany, I'm afraid to ask you, is that what is going to come down? And Brittany wrote back, yes, as far as I understand, the funding is to improve what is existing, not start anew. With that said, though, staff are still evaluating options and will advertise opportunities for community engagement when appropriate. So Brittany has given me hope for a new build over a rebuild that I've been advocating for some time. With respect, I can't wait for a notice of an opportunity for community engagement. I want to give you mine now, because the last time I was offered a chance to engage in recreation matters, I didn't get my chance to be heard. What I'm asking council to do today is to ask staff and the committee of council, when they bring in their plan to spend $1,695,000 on a retrofit of the Campbell Arena into a new community center, that they also bring in a plan to spend $1,695,000 on a new build community center, community hall, family center at the Campbell Athletic Field, and let the ratepayers of our community have input as to which plan they would prefer. I'm requesting that you contact the federal and provincial governments through our local MP and MPP through their joint Investing in Canada program, and allow Georgian Bluffs, with public support, to change their application, which was made 2 and 3 years ago, and allow the option of a new build Campbell Community Center at the athletic field. I note in the press release April 8th, under the quick facts, they talk about investing approximately $420 million federally and $320 million provincially under the Community Culture and Recreation Infrastructure Program. And they say this stream supports the construction of new facilities and upgrades to existing facilities. And that is what they say, new facilities and upgrades. In the Sun-Times story about the funding boost, April 17th, Mr. Meneses is quoted as saying, it isn't going to be easy to do all the work with the funds being provided. I say the opposite happens in a new build. We will have more than enough funds, and we will have a state-of-the-art center that we deserve after all these years in that old barn of an arena. Respectfully, we don't need an arena anymore, just a community hall. A new build would be state-of-the-art, one of a kind because of its newness, the big, perfect site, yes, the aesthetics, the scenery, the sprung floor for old-time country dancing, and the huge scenic landscaping potential. Why spend money on roof replacement and outside cladding on one half the space that we don't need anymore? Why repair, upgrade old design standards and the old arena's small dressing rooms? We don't need them anymore. We just need a nice sized community hall, a community center. As I respectfully pointed out to you in my left out document under number 14, we need and deserve a hall. And just follow me. As you enter two wide doors, you see a big foyer housing a small office meeting room on your left and a big space in front of it for clothes racks. On the right-hand side in the foyer are two very large bathrooms, women's and men's. As you enter the hall through two very, very large wide glass doors, on your right, there is a large permanent refreshment bar. On the left side are portable stacking tables and chairs piled high against the back wall. At the far end of the hall is a permanent stage in the middle with roll-out storage cupboards underneath to hold shuffleboard sticks, pickleball nets, carpet bowl balls, mats, bridge and euchre tables, fitness equipment, etc. To the left of the stage on the back wall, a large exit door, and to the left of it, recessed out through the back wall, a utility furnace maintenance room. To the right of the stage and recessed out through the back wall, a functional kitchen capable of serving food at wedding receptions, gatherings, and dances. And last but not least, a sprung cushioned floor, the best that money can buy for dancing pleasure. With $1,695,000, there would now be money to put big bay windows all along the north wall of the center to look out on the Campbell Mountain and the escarpment that defines us here in Campbell, North Keppel. A door now on this wall leading to the outside patio area, the beer garden, the barbecue area, the bridal path, and wedding, arbor, picnic area, the gazebo, pathways by a berm of flowering shrubs, etc., would now be amenable with all the new funds. When we were starting the Campbell Women's Instant Lookout project 12 years ago, I asked son Dick in Hong Kong if he would come back for a holiday and design the lookout for us. He did, and he did it gratis to the community. While designing it, he said, "Dad, this is going to be a prize winner." And it was. It won one of the prizes of the Owen Sound University Women's Association contest for the top 3 wonders of Grey Bruce. I think I could talk Dick into coming back for some holidays and designing the entire athletic field site to house a new build community center. Who knows? He may say, "This is going to be a prize winner again, Dad. Deja vu all over." And he might well do the job gratis again for his dad. Imagine how he would design a circular driveway drop-off at the front door. He would have a field day designing all the aesthetic amenities on the north side of the building, pathways, rose vine arbor, gazebo, picnic shelter, the flowering berm, the patio area, benches. On the south side, it would be interesting to see how he would tie in the large parking area along with a playground, a softball back screen, a soccer net, a basketball net for shooting hoops, and maybe a multi-purpose pad for pickleball and other sports. Where would you like to see your daughter, your granddaughter, your niece be married at or hold her wedding reception? I say at our athletic field with a new build community center. Welcome to the future. Build it and they will come. Dances, concerts, banquets, wedding receptions, and weddings, a meeting place for gatherings, steak nights, pub nights, reunions, bingos, farmers market, and a host of daily ordinary recreation activities for everyone, all ages, all interests, all abilities, in a totally accessible and scenic environment. With leadership, facilitation from the township, in concert with an active community committee, things will happen big time at our athletic field housing a brand new community center. The words to close, the word citizen engagement now has become the buzzword for councillors and staff since Mr. CAO came on our scene. And I like the words. So as a long-time 24-year volunteer, thank you for letting me become engaged with you this afternoon. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Keith. before I turn this over to Mr. Menez, I want to assure you that when we start the public consultations on, the clerk will give you a personal invitation to make sure you're aware of the meeting and what's going to happen. I can assure you that will happen.
Well, appreciate that.
Mr. Menez, our CEO, would you want to make some comments first, please?
Sure. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Davidson, for your comments and input. I can assure you that staff are looking at all of our options right now. We are scheduled to bring a report forward to council on the future of this project and kicking off this project in early June. So there will be a fulsome report going to council with a timeline associated with it, with a couple of opportunities for citizen engagement and input from the public. I will also let you know that part of what we are looking at is the details around the funding. My understanding is that there are several different elements to the funding that you discussed. Some of it is for new construction, some of it is for rehabilitation of existing infrastructure. I believe the announcement that came out, without exception, all of the municipalities that were provided money was for the rehabilitation of existing infrastructure. And we are exploring options and what that means. I will be fully transparent that I am fearful that if we were to go to the province and the federal government and ask for the potential to reallocate that funding and use it for a new build, that it might be pulled. But that's part of what will be coming back to council next month with those details. And if council gives us the okay, how we would kick off the project and what we would be intending to do with the Campbell Community Hub. And I couldn't agree more with you. Whatever it's going to be built, whatever we're going to retrofit, it's going to be multi-generational and it's going to be multifunctional so that it can become a true community hub. But that's part of the defining that project scope and bringing it to council, and then having all of our residents have an opportunity for input. So it is coming. Look for it in early June. We will be having a report coming back to council with further details on how we're going to be proposing that we move forward.
Thank you, Al. I'll open the floor up to the committee now. Any committee member wish to make a comment or questions? Seeing none, Madam Clerk. Councilor Barfoot, I believe your hand is up.
Yeah, I just have some questions. Good presentation, Keith. Thank you very much. The only thing is, Mr. Menez, I like to hear of things through council. It's nice, you know, that all this comes out now, but to start off, I hear the first thing was we're going to build a new whatever. What are we going to do with, first of all, what are we going to do with the old one?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, I think it was Mr. Davidson that suggested that we are going to build a new one. I don't think staff have ever suggested that we're going to build a new one. I think what we're saying is that we're looking at the requirements of accepting the funding and what conditions are tied to that funding. Right now, based on a cursory review, I believe that the funding is tied to the rehabilitation of existing infrastructure. So repairing and sort of bringing a little bit of modernization to the existing building, and we're going to look at what that would cost. You know, longer term, I'm sure there's going to be other funding opportunities to consider building a new structure in the area, and I love the idea of the athletic fields being what the community hub would be. But I think we're putting the cart in front of the horse right now. We need to do some due diligence, and we will be coming back to council in June to give you sort of some additional details and what we would be proposing for council in terms of your consideration for what the future of what this project would look like.
Thank you, Al.
Mr. Menez, thank you, but I guess I missed the answer to my question there.
Sorry. So through you, Mr. Mayor, can you repeat the question? I'll try to do a better job to answer.
What are you going to do with the old one?
Oh. So through you, Mr. Mayor, right now, our preliminary understanding is that the funding is tied to rehabilitating and retrofitting the existing building. If there is a desire, and if council directs staff to look at the opportunity to perhaps spend that money in a new build, then we would cross that bridge when we get there in regards to the existing facility. I cannot with any certainty right now let council know that that money can be reallocated to a new build. My understanding right now is that funding was allocated specifically for a single purpose, which was to repurpose or retrofit and rehabilitate the existing structure that's there now.
Carol, does that answer your question to a point?
Yes, no. I'm assuming that we will be kept updated as we hear anything. Because as a counselor, I've been telling people, as Mr. Davidson said, that the community will have some involvement in this. The community helped build the arena that's there, and I think it's only fair that we include the community in the decision making. So that is very important to me, and I think Mr. Davidson, being a member of the community, will have to agree with it. The community should be involved in the decision making.
Thank you, Councilor Barfoot, and I can't agree any more than that. That yes, the community will have involvement in the process. What Mr. Mendez is trying to explain to us is that we have to follow the guidelines of the grant as it was issued to us. And we do not know if the province and the feds would let us go transfer the money to a new build. We do not know that. We can make some calls and inquiries and so on and see what we can do. Any of that information will be brought back to council for council as a whole to make the decision what way we want to go. As for the public process, the public will be involved in it to find out what the end result is going to be. It's going to be a long drawn out process. I believe what we're sort of anticipating, this project will have all the we'll all call the design and what's going to happen, where it's going to happen. So it'll be done in 2021. The actual build or renovations will be done in probably in 2022. That's what I'm guessing will happen. In other words, we have the time to be able to do it, and we're going to do it hopefully right, and hopefully everybody's going to be happy. Is there any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, Mr. Davidson, you keep that in the back of your mind that you will definitely get an invitation from our clerk. And I know Brittany will do that 100%. You will be invited to any public input. And again, thank you.
I appreciate it. Please try for another option. Please give us 2 options.
Great ideas, Keith, and we're going to investigate everything. And again, thank you very much for presenting here tonight.
Okay, thank you.
So we'll move on for our agenda. We're down to our staff reports. The first recommendation is that the report from Cassie Rocca, Director of Finance, regarding the 2021 operating and capital budget be received, and that committee hereby approves amendments to the 2021 budget, and staff are hereby directed to present the 2021 sums required by the operating and capital budgets and the 2021 tax rates bylaw for approval on May 12, 2021 council meeting. Just so I can make sure before I ask for a mover and a seconder, Madam Clerk, this motion before us is just to receive the report. Our final approval of our budget won't be until May 12th. Is that correct?
That is correct. The intention of this report and the associated motion is simply to provide council an update following their meeting on March 30th. And Mr. Mayor, if I may, prior to you calling the vote, you cut out slightly during the reading of the second line. So for council or committee's information, the second line of the motion reads as follows. That committee hereby approves the amendments to the 2021 draft budget as outlined in this report.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Deputy Mayor Carlton, you're going to move the motion?
No, I was going to ask why we skipped correspondence.
I guess that's a mistake of myself. Would you let us, all right, let's stop there and we'll go back to correspondence. We'll follow the agenda as presented. I apologize for that. Our first correspondent is from the Municipal Affairs and Housing, Municipal Code of Conduct consultation. Madam Clerk, I'm going to turn the floor over to you since I sent that to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Deputy Mayor Carlton, for keeping us on track. So the mayor is correct. Mr. Mayor did send this to myself for inclusion on the agenda. As you will see in this correspondence, the ministry is requesting that one member of each local council attend this information session regarding the municipal codes of conduct. As you'll recall, at the April 21st meeting, I included a link to the public consultation process that is currently being performed by the province regarding updating our municipal codes of conduct and the regulations contained therein. So with council's direction this evening, we need to select one member to attend this seminar on behalf of the council.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I guess I'm going to open the floor up. Any member of council want to volunteer for this? Because if no one wants to volunteer, I would, but Deputy Mayor Carlton, are you volunteering? Or do you want to attend the session?
If you're willing to go, then I won't.
No, I'm opening up for council. Is there any member of council? Sorry, Madam Clerk, I did not hear that.
So Deputy Mayor Carlton, did you want to put your name forward as an interested party?
Yes, that's what I said. I will. If no one else wants to, I would put my name forward for that.
Okay, Madam Clerk, you have the person that will attend this session.
Thank you. And just for clarification, if I could have a show of hands of all those in favor of sending Deputy Mayor Carlton? Thank you.
And again, this is virtual meeting. Yeah. Okay, so we've got that here. Now we're down to Grey Sauble Conservation Authority amendments to the Conservation Act. Madam Clerk, I'll turn this over to you again.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just as a brief highlight of this correspondence, I will note that the Grey Sauble Conservation Authority, the CAO of said authority being Tim Lanthier, will be appearing before our council on June 16th to provide additional information regarding the amendments that this correspondence cites. But as a high-level overview, as we currently do not have any citizen appointees to the Grey Sauble Conservation Authority Board, the impacts of these amendments will be minimal to the township at this time. In the future, should we choose to appoint a citizen member to this board, then we will have to fit in with the amendments. But otherwise, if the representatives of the board have any further comments, being Councillor Kathy Mark-Coburn or yourself, Mr. Mayor, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Look forward for Tim and Scott coming to our council meeting, I believe June 16th, to further give us any more information or ask any questions the council may have. Councillor Coburn, any comments? I think it's very minimum to Georgian Bluffs, but it's great that they're coming and we'll have a great discussion that night. Seeing none, since I've done the correspondence, Deputy Mayor Carlton, I will move on with with our agenda. We're down to staff reports. The first one is finance. I have a recommendation here that the report from Cassie Rocca, Director of Finance, regarding the 2021 operating capital budget be received, and that committee hereby approves amendments to the 2021 draft budget as outlined in this report, and the staff are hereby directed to present the 2021 sums required by the operating capital budgets tax rates by law for approval on May 12, 2021 council meeting. Someone to move to put the motion on the floor, please. Moved by Deputy Mayor Carlton, second by Councillor Coburn. Cassie, do you wish to speak to this?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this report is to provide council an update on changes that have been made to the draft budget since our budget presentation on March 30th. So what staff are proposing is that we do not change the tax levy as presented on March 30th. But we are recommending a few additional projects that will be funded from other sources. So after our meeting on March 30th, the federal government did announce that they were doubling gas tax funds in 2021. And some of the feedback that we got from council and ratepayers at our budget meeting was that more funds should be spent on recreation, and specifically Centennial Park and the Campbell Community Center. So what we are proposing is that a portion of that additional gas tax funds be used to redo the driveway at Centennial Park. We're going to remove the existing driveway and put a new surface in there so that it is safe and so that our residents basically have a safer access to that park. And we're proposing to spend about $200,000 on that project. We are also proposing to spend an additional $10,000 to replace some flagpoles throughout the parks in our township. And then with the remaining of the gas tax funds, we will transfer to reserves for use for 2022. So all of these projects, because we are using a grant, do not affect the tax levy that we had proposed on March 30th. Additionally, as already talked about tonight, we received word that we were successful in our application for grant funding for rehabilitation of the Campbell Arena. And because we are still working on the public consultation phase and the design phase, there will be no impact to the 2021 budget due to this project. And that is because there's a lot of work that still needs to be done before any money is spent. So again, we're looking at starting the public consultation and design in 2021 with funds not really to be spent until 2022. So again, there's no budget impact. Sorry, yes, Councillor Sutherland.
Go ahead, Councillor Sutherland.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Madam Treasurer, I just have a question on the gas tax fund, and that you were going to use it, or you propose to use it for the Centennial Park driveway.
Correct.
And parking lot or whatever. I'm concerned because if it's a gas tax fund, how can it be used in parks and recreation? Should it not be used on roadways? That would be my question on that.
So under gas tax funding, recreation is an eligible expenditure. Typically, as a township, we do spend that money on roadways or bridges, but we are permitted to spend that for recreational uses as well. So it is compliant with the grant.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Madam Treasurer, the other part of that Centennial Park re-driveway upgrades, I believe the township's going to install gates at the top of the hill so it can be closed off during the winter months. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes, you are correct. And we are also looking at putting some guide rails along the entrance of the driveway because it is quite a significant slope leading into that park.
Okay, thank you.
So even like with that project, because of the cost, a report will be brought back to council to award that contract.
Okay.
Okay. So then a couple other changes that have been made. One of the things that we talked about, or two of the things that we talked about at our budget meeting was that we were awaiting the results of the organizational review and the airport feasibility study before we officially passed the budget. You received a presentation from Pesci and Associates on April 21st, and direction was given to staff to provide a further report on possible implementation and recommendations from their findings. So we are not proposing to alter the budget in any way due to those findings. We will work within what's already been budgeted and presented to council for 2021. So we do recommend approving the budget. By approving the budget, you are not approving specifically any recommendations or changes in the org structure that might have been presented by Pesci and Associates a couple weeks ago. you would specifically approve that in a separate motion and a separate report. So approving the budget does not approve any changes to the org structure or pay grids. You would do that separately. The other thing that has been delayed is the presentation of the airport feasibility study. Again, we recommend not holding up approval of the budget for that study. Any capital projects at the airport, again, would have to separately be approved by council before moving forward. So by approving the budget next week, you would not be approving capital investment to take place at the airport. That again would be separate in a separate report from staff. And then the only other change that was made, and again, it doesn't affect the taxes to be levied, it affects the tax rate, are some changes made at the county level. So Grey County has approved, but has not formally passed, the elimination of the vacant and excess classes in the commercial and industrial taxes. So right now, commercial and industrial are broken out into two categories, occupied and vacant and excess. And what we're proposing is to eliminate the vacant and excess and have those properties taxed fully at the occupied rate. The impact to Georgian Bluffs, again, is very minimal. We do not have a lot of vacant and excess commercial and industrial properties. And the effect it has on our tax rate is it only changes it by 0.02%. So basically, those classes of properties already receive a reduced assessment because they are not occupied. So it just doesn't make sense to also give them a reduced tax rate when their assessment has already been reduced based on their type of property that they are. That was very high level explanation of vacant and excess taxes. And I do go into a bit more detail in my report, but I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any questions about how that works.
Thank you, Madam Treasurer. Council, have any questions of her treasurer? Councillor Colburn, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I bet our Director of Finance can guess where my questions are going to fall. So can we go back to the airport for a minute or two, please?
Yep.
I'm discouraged that the study is not going to be available to us before we're asked to approve the budget. My understanding was that that was going to help us inform how we feel about the budget moving forward. And although you're not indicating spending any money on capital expenditures for this budget, the almost $500,000 in operating is significant. And so I do have some concerns about that for sure. I do have a question for you. You're recommending that we include in the budget the operating expenses, the $456,000 for 2021, but that we would not necessarily put money into capital expenses. My understanding was if we keep the airport open and operational, that we are required to do certain upgrades. And by keeping it open and approving that operating budget in 2021, are we in fact committing ourselves to have to spend money on upgrades to the capital part of the airport?
So my answer is no. So that $456,000. Yeah. Can I keep going? You must have a delay, Dwight. Okay. So my answer is no. That $456,000 is both the operating and the capital and the loan payment. So that's the total amount. So right now we are operating the airport at status quo, meaning, you know, we have the airport manager in place. We're doing minimal repairs and maintenance, and we are awaiting further direction from that feasibility study before we make any decisions on capital investment. I guess that somewhat answers your question. I don't know if our CIO wants to jump in here on the airport feasibility study.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I can certainly give a little more clarity. The airport study continues to be a work in progress. I think we've had about 3 or 4 drafts to date. It's still not where it needs to be in order to present it to council for your consideration. But I think it's a good compromise in terms of what our treasurer is suggesting is the budget would be approved. We would continue to pay the operating expenditures, but before any major capital expenditures were even contemplated, we would bring that forward to council first, and council would then have an opportunity whether we would proceed with those capital expenditures or not. And we certainly wouldn't bring any capital expenditures forward until we know what the study is going to say and what council's response to that feasibility study will be. So really the compromise is the budget moves forward, but you have our commitment that no capital funds would be expended until after we hear the feasibility study and what council tells us they want and how they want to proceed after they hear that feasibility study.
Thanks, Al. Councilor Colburn, a follow-up?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So if we go ahead and approve this amount for 2021, I imagine we're continuing to hire management for the airport on a month-to-month basis. So if the feasibility study indicates that we wish not to continue operating that facility, then we're not committed to the rest of the year. Is that correct?
Go ahead, Al.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, my understanding is that management contract is on a month-to-month basis and can be terminated with 1 month's notice or with notice. So we would not be committed to the balance of the year for that management contract.
Okay. Councilor Barfoot, I see your hand is up. Madam Clerk, is Councilor Barfoot still here?
Councilor Barfoot, your mic is muted. Now it's not.
Madam Clerk?
Sorry. I guess I'm having a hard time wading through all this. What if? I've heard what if for so many years, I'm getting tired of it. What happens if the feasibility study doesn't come out the way the county wants it or the way we want it? What happens then?
Al?
First of all, I just want to point out, I'm still having a problem why everybody would go ahead and hire someone to manage the airport that has an obvious pecuniary interest.
Mr. Mayor, you are muted.
Madam Clerk, my internet keeps cutting in and out here in the north end of the Georgian Bluffs, but Al, did you understand that question from Councilor Barfoot?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe it was two-pronged. The first question, I believe, was what if council doesn't accept or doesn't agree with the recommendations coming out of the feasibility study? I would suggest the following. The feasibility study is an input into council's decision. Council does not have to accept any of the recommendations or what the study says. Council, what I would hope council would do is accept the presentation and the study, receive it for information, and then refer it back to staff, where staff would then consult with county staff in terms of what the future would hold, and then staff would bring a report back to council in terms of recommendations for the future of the airport, incorporating not only the recommendations or the feedback from the feasibility study, but also in terms of what we believe the county will recommend or how the county will proceed with the feasibility study. The second portion, I think, of the question was whether there was a conflict of interest from the study, I guess the consultant that was hired to do the feasibility study. I can't speak to that. I mean, that horse has left the barn. I mean, it's done. The feasibility study will be what it will be. And then, as I said, council can choose to accept it. Council can choose to say no to it. There's no obligation for council to accept any of the recommendations that come forward from that feasibility study.
I'm sorry, what are you saying, Dwight? You're breaking up.
I wonder if you got your questions answered, Carol. Madam Clerk, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, and Councillor Barfoot, you are now muted. If you have a follow-up question, the mayor has invited you to do so.
No, I can't stand any more answers.
Okay. If there's no other questions, Madam Treasurer from Council on the motion before us, Madam Clerk, would you please take the vote, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I call your name, please indicate whether you are for or against the motion as presented. Councillor Carol Barfoot. Councillor Carol Barfoot.
Sorry, opposed.
Thank you. Councillor Kathy Moore-Coburn.
For.
Councillor Paul Sutherland.
For.
Councillor Ryan Thompson.
For.
Councillor Grant Pringle.
For.
Deputy Mayor Sue Carlton.
For.
And Mayor Dwight Burley.
For.
Thank you, and that carries.
Thank you. Moving on to our agenda, we're down to our next recommendation, that the committee hereby approves the elimination of the vacant unit rebate program, and that a bylaw to eliminate the vacant unit program be presented at the May 12th, 2021 council meeting. Someone to move to put on the floor, please. Moved by Councillor Pringle, second by Councillor Sullivan. Is there any discussion on the motion before us? Madam Clerk, I'm going to turn the floor over to you. Sorry. Go ahead, Cassie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this report is to eliminate the vacancy unit rebate for the township. So the vacancy unit rebate used to be under the authority of the upper tier, being Grey County. The regulations have changed, and now the lower tiers do have the ability to eliminate the program should they so choose. We talked about it at our Grey County Treasurers meeting, and all the treasurers were in agreement that this program should be ended. So basically what this program did was, if you were a commercial or an industrial building and a portion of your building wasn't being occupied or used, you could apply to reduce your tax rate for that portion of the building from being taxed at the full commercial rate to a reduced rate. And in some townships, not in ours, there was a lot of buildings or ratepayers that applied for that. In our case, we only have two in 2020 that applied. And in my 6 years here, I think at most I've signed off on 4 or 5 in a year. So we haven't really had that much uptick. But the benefit of removing this program is that it encourages, our commercial and our industrial ratepayers to use their buildings, basically, to get them up and moving, to get them open. A good example is we have some vacant commercial buildings on the Sunset Strip, and they've been vacant for a number of years. They receive this rebate. And, if they didn't, maybe it would encourage them to get other businesses in their buildings so that, it has that economic benefit to our area. So I do support eliminating this rebate. I've put the figures in on the tax impact to Georgian Bluffs. Really, it's been minimal. And like I said, it's only been 2 properties. So I do think this is something that our council should support.
Thank you, Madam Treasurer. Does the committee have any questions of the Treasurer? I do not see any, Madam Clerk. Please take the vote.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I call your name, please indicate whether you are for or against the motion as presented. Councillor Carol Barfoot.
For.
Councillor Kathy Moore-Coburn.
For.
Councillor Paul Sutherland.
For.
Councillor Ryan Thompson.
For.
Councillor Grant Pringle.
Four.
Deputy Mayor Sue Carlton,
Four.
and Mayor Dwight Burley.
4.
Thank you, and that carries.
Thank you. Moving off our agenda, we're down to the clerk's department. Our recommendation here that the report LEG 2021-13 routine disclosure policy be received, and that committee hereby endorses the practice of routine and active disclosure in provisions of non-confidential township recordings, and that routine disclosure policy EDMIN 03-2021 is hereby approved. Someone to move to put it on the floor, please. Moved by Councillor Thompson, second by Deputy Mayor Carlton. Is there any discussion on the motion before us? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, you take the vote. No, Madam Clerk, please speak to it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to provide a high-level overview for council's information, the policy you have before you this evening is one that speaks to routine disclosure of township information. The IPC, as well as the MFIPA Act, being the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Personal Privacy Act, both speak to active and routine dissemination of township records. So active dissemination is the practice of providing information via our township website. So for example, all agendas, minutes, select bylaws, they are all provided through active dissemination on our website. As included in the report, staff are undertaking a revamp of our current electronic records management system, which will help increase the amount of records which are actively disseminated through the township website. Following active dissemination is that of routine disclosure. Routine disclosure removes the formality of a Freedom of Information request, thereby making more information more readily available to the members of our public, thereby increasing transparency of the township and our associated records. As included in the report and the policy, personal information will not be disclosed in any way via routine disclosure. And only those records included in the policy in Appendix A to said policy will be available for disclosure routinely. All other information will still be subject to a Freedom of Information request. And thank you, Mr. Mayor. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Does council have any questions on the motion before us? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, you take the vote, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I call your name, please indicate your vote. Councillor Carol Barfoot.
4.
Councillor Kathy Moore-Coburn.
4.
Councillor Paul Sutherland.
4.
Councillor Ryan Thompson.
4.
Councillor Grant Pringle.
4.
Deputy Mayor Sue Carlton.
4.
Burley.
4.
Thank you, and that carries.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. A second here to catch up. We're down to our next recommendation. The report LEG 2021-14 regarding amendments to the Township Procedural Bylaw 2019-125 be received, and that a bylaw to enact amendments to Township Procedural Bylaw 2019-125 report 3% for April 21 council meeting. Someone to move to put on the floor, please. Moved by Councillor Colburn, second by Deputy Mayor Carlton. Is there any discussion on the motion before us? Madam Clerk, please go ahead. I apologize for missing you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I will keep my comments fairly brief and high level. I will say that I received some questions from Councillor Coburn this afternoon regarding this report, and I will detail both the questions and answers following my high level review. So throughout the course of 2020, as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, we were amending the procedure bylaw to do one thing and then undoing that and doing another thing. So first, this consolidated bylaw is born out of the information for both the public and council as to where we currently stand after this past year of electronic meetings and how they apply to boards and etc. So as you'll recall, last year we adopted an electronic participation policy that permits blanket participation in electronic meetings even beyond COVID. So even following conclusion of the pandemic, councillors will still have the opportunity to participate in meetings electronically, subject to certain restrictions. Now, this policy, when we adopted it, we knew that was an organic document that we knew would likely need amending as we moved through what is the ongoing pandemic and beyond. So following moving back into council chambers and readopting our hybrid model whenever we should get there, staff will provide the electronic participation policy again for council's review, and we can update it as we see fit at that time. Further, Section 11 of the procedure bylaw has been updated to include all of the closed session meeting exemptions under the Municipal Act. So as you'll see in the bylaw, some were missing. We have amended the procedure bylaw to include all of those exemptions. Section 20, being presentations, is proposed to be removed. Presentations and delegations are essentially one and the same. The only thing that differentiates a presentation from a delegation as it currently stands is the presence of a PowerPoint presentation. So staff are proposing to remove that altogether and simply quantify all speakers as delegates. Section 21, delegations, has been amended to include a specific opportunity for council to call a special council meeting where more than 10 registrations have elected to speak in regards to one specific item. So I listed the Wyerton Keppel International Airport public meeting as an example that would fall within that classification, as there was 25 speakers registered to speak. Section 22, being the consent agenda, has been amended to adopt a new procedure regarding resolutions from other municipalities. Specifically, as it currently stands, any municipality resolution that I receive automatically is placed onto the consent agenda. What I'm proposing to do is consolidate all of those resolutions, send them to council via email for your information, and if there is one motion that you specifically feel strongly that council should support or should discuss further, then you will simply notify myself and I will place it on the agenda. So in considering the questions that I had received from Councillor Coburn this afternoon, one was regarding the necessity to take recorded votes in all virtual meetings. So in a platform such as this, as you'll recall, in our electronic participation policy, where all members are participating virtually, all votes, with the exception of procedural matters, are taken via a recorded vote. So given where we are and sometimes our lack of unreliable internet and Wi-Fi technology, as you know, Mr. Mayor has somewhat demonstrated this evening, it is the most streamlined and transparent way to take votes in fully virtual meetings, just in case someone's video turns off and the chair can't see you or the public can't see you. Unfortunately, I think that that's the best way to continue to move forward. When or if we ever get back into in-person meetings or hybrid meetings, we can then move more towards a showing of the virtual hands or a showing of your physical hands and reevaluating how we take votes at that point. But until we're all face-to-face again, I think recorded votes are our best bet. The second question was in regards to, I can just pull it up here, the amendments to Section 31, specifically in regards to taking a vote. So Councillor Coburn asked me to be prepared to speak to this, and I am. So I have included the call the question section in our procedure bylaw, as Robert's Rules of Order speaks to it as a secondary motion, which permits any member to call the vote through the chair, or in other words, close debate on a subject. So without going into too deep of detail, Robert's Rules of Order and general meeting practices quantify motions in two separate categories, being main motions and secondary motions. So main motions are those which are placed on the floor by the chair, i.e. the recommendation included in this report. Secondary motions are those which have an impact on main motions, including to amend, postpone, defer, refer, or call the question. So our procedure bylaw included wording regarding all other secondary motions with exception to call the question. So all I've done by adding this item is simply provided clarity as to the procedures should a member choose to call a question. So for example, should a member wish to close debate on any topic, the member would then call the question or call the vote through the chair. And so long as that member receives a seconder and the motion receives 2/3 support of council, the chair would then call the question, therefore ending all debate on the subject. So all I've done there is just include clarity regarding what that means and how we would handle that scenario should it ever come up. And that's all my comments.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Councillor Colburn, do you have any other questions, or you got all your questions answered, I believe, or?
Yeah, yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I did. In regards to the first point, Brittany, by virtue of the fact that we're being recorded, all of our votes are recorded when we raise our hands. So I guess I would love to see us move to a showing of hands in a virtual environment because it's faster. And I think it will save us a significant amount of time during the meetings. And I think there's got to be a way that we can all be visible in showing our hands, whether it's a virtual hand or our anatomical hand. So I would just like us to think about that possibly in the future. And then when we ask for a recorded vote in this virtual setting, that's when I see us going one by one and having us vote so that it's recorded on paper as well as being videotaped. So that was the distinction I was making, and I hope we don't lose that because it does take an awful lot of time going through the votes one by one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Colburn. I may make a comment here is that on the upper tier level, the chair, in our case, would be the warden. When the vote is called, all he asks is anyone opposed to the motion on the floor. That's all he calls for. And if no one opposes, that means the motion carried. It's just another way they do it, and it's just something we may look at, but Madam Clerk, I'm gonna leave that to your discretion at this time. If there's no other comments or questions on this motion before us, Madam Clerk, you take the vote, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And as I noted, the electronic participation policy is something that, you know, we all view as organic and can review as we see fit. So with council's direction, I can bring that participation policy back to council for amendments such as these. I would just need a show of hands in favor of that direction. Thank you. And that carries, and thank you. I will work on bringing that participation policy back for council's review. With that being said, Mr. Mayor, I will now take the vote on the motion on the floor. When I call your name, please indicate whether you are for or against the motion as presented. Councillor Carol Barfoot.
For.
Councillor Kathy Moore-Coburn.
For.
Councillor Paul Sutherland.
For.
Councillor Ryan Thompson.
For.
Councillor Grant Pringle.
For.
Mayor Sue Carlton.
For.
And Mayor Dwight Burley.
For.
Thank you, and that carries.
Thank you. Moving on to our agenda, we're down to operations. I have a recommendation here that report OPS 2021-21 Comprehensive Water and Wastewater Master Plan be received, and that GSS Engineering Consulting Limited be retained at the cost of $167,800 exclusive HST to prepare a comprehensive wastewater master plan for the towns of Georgian Bluffs. Someone to move to put it on the floor, please. Moved by Deputy Mayor Carlson, second by Councillor Pringle. Mr. Domer, are you here? Steve, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to committee. The objective of this comprehensive water and wastewater master plan is to develop a comprehensive plan that will incorporate all facets of the management, expansion, and future funding of water, wastewater, and stormwater systems for the East Linton settlement area. This process will involve an assessment of the existing servicing infrastructure, also identify any necessary upgrades and future servicing priorities. So this is the first key step to any potential growth within our areas. It is a tool that will help out with the planning department as well for potential zoning and all that other stuff down the road for studies and stuff like that. The best part of this is forecasting out 20 to 30 years down the road here. We are also going to be reconfiguring the whole Potawatomi connection that was done in 2017, the study that was brought forward to council back then when you guys did an EA out there to look at potential eliminating and bringing the East Linton down to Potawatomi. This is also going to be plugged into this, and this is also going to be going north of, we're looking north towards the Pasquille and Grey Road 1 area as well. So we are looking for the future of the East Linton, Cobble Beach area and Potawatomi area and Brook area for potential servicing down the road. In regards to the funding of this project, the amount is coming from the East Linton water reserves. So this will be coming out of the reserve account to fund this process. It is going to take roughly about a year to have a final master plan completed. The consultant has done this kind of work before and he has been retained by the township for other master plans that we've done in previous terms. So from where we sit, this would be an ideal first step to moving the Georgian Bluffs into the next direction of potential economic growth and everything else. So.
Thank you, Steve. Does council have any questions on the motion before us? Deputy Mayor Carlton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to Mr. Dolmeyer. Just a question about when we're taking funds out of the reserve funds for East Linton water treatment. How does that money go back in? Does that get replaced as, say, more people come onto the system, or is that just funds that are taken out and spent?
So I'm going to defer that question to the Director of Finance, because that's a finance question.
Cassie, go ahead.
Thank you. So what we do is built into our water rates is a 20% charge to be contributed to reserves. So we collect every 20% of every dollar collected goes into reserves for that water system. I will note that Steve and I have been working on reviewing the water rates as well as the water budgets and coming up with a financial plan for all of our water systems. So that will be forthcoming to council and to take a look at, future planning for those systems and how much we should be putting aside to replace the infrastructure as it becomes due.
Deputy Mayor Carlton, did that answer your question? Councillor Colburn, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to Steve and/or Cassie. My question was similar to Deputy Mayor Carlton's. It was in regards to reserves. We have heard you say, Cassie, that our reserves aren't adequate. And then we get a report where 167,000, I think it is coming out of reserves now. So is that concerning in the overall picture of our reserves? And then I would just say that given what Collingwood is going through with their water issues, this is probably a very good idea so that we don't find ourselves in trouble. So just that one question, if you don't mind.
Cassie, you gonna take that on?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Coburn. So the East Linton Water Reserve is a reserve fund. So when we put that money aside, it is specifically for the East Linton Reserve System because we collect it from the East Linton users. That reserve at December 31st, 2020 had about $1.5 million in it. I'm proposing that we take this money from the reserve right now because we are working on that bigger financial plan. So the other option would be to increase water rates immediately to help pay for the study, which we don't want to do. We want to have a complete, full financial picture, which will incorporate some of these things. And I do understand your concern about using reserves. I'm always concerned too. But in this case, we need to do this to do some of that long-term planning and to make some of those decisions about, you know, how much we should be putting aside, how much we should be collecting from residents and so forth.
Okay. Cassie, just so I'm clear in my mind too. So through time, that $167,000 will be paid back to that system reserve. Is that correct?
Yes, and yes, you can say that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Does council have any other questions? Madam Clerk, I'm scared to ask this, but would you take the vote, please?
Absolutely. When I call your name, please indicate your vote. Councillor Carol Barfoot?
For.
Councillor Kathy Moore-Coburn?
For.
Councillor Paul Sutherland?
For.
Councillor Ryan Thompson?
For.
Councillor Grant Pringle?
For.
Deputy Mayor Sue Carlton?
For.
And Mayor Dwight Burley?
For.
Thank you, and that carries.
Thank you. Moving on. Madam Clerk, did any members of the public register for public question period?
They did not.
Okay. Moving on. We've no unfinished business. Councillor Colburn?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not even sure if this is appropriate for me to ask at this time, but going back to the discussion we had earlier around the Satacrity boat launch, a comment or two from a ratepayer struck me as significant in terms of polling specifically the folks who live in the immediate vicinity of that water access point. It seems to me that that would be our typical practice if we were doing something out of the ordinary or making a decision that might impact the locals specifically. We generally do it by so many meters radius. So I guess my question is for Steve, if he's still around, or perhaps Al, why would we not poll specifically those ratepayers who will be most impacted by the decision that we make regarding that water access point, and can we do that? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'm likely going to defer to our clerk who handled the distribution of the for the input. But I would say the following: that would be one input for sure. Would be the local residents, similar to a planning application where you do a specific radius around the property in question. The other thing is we're really talking about a public asset here. And generally when you're talking about a public access or a public amenity, it isn't necessarily restricted to a geographical sort of restriction. Anyone within the township, anyone could use a public access. And so that was part of the rationale why we did a survey as well. But I'm going to defer to the clerk who will give you some more sort of detailed information in terms of who we reached out to and how.
Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And without having the map directly in front of me, I will do my best to remember the geographical area, but we did circulate to everyone within a certain radius of that Satacrity Heights boat launch, and that would include the residences that abut that access point, I'll call it. So those directly across the street also received written notification of the survey as well as the public meeting. And without knowing the area overly well, and I apologize, we did move from what I believe is Pumpkin Seed Lane all the way down to the other side of the Bay Inlet. And I apologize, I don't recall what that other road is, but it was a very wide, vast area that we did cover. And we went all the way past the county road as well. So we did try to cover the widest span that we possibly could to ensure that all of those that were directly affected would receive direct notification of this public meeting as well as the survey.
Thank you. No, I appreciate hearing that, and it sounds like we reached out to all the appropriate individuals. So in response to our CAO's comment, Al, I would just say this one is a little unique in terms of it being a public access or a municipally owned space, in that it is plunked right in the middle of a subdivision. So it's a little unique, I think, in that regard. But thank you. I appreciate that that was circulated appropriately.
Thank you, Councillor Colburn. Councillor Barfoot, excuse me, I see your hand is up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've been thinking about this Presqu'île issue for a long time. And hindsight's 2020. Maybe we should, what we should have done, obviously, is all given these people a chance to speak, but we changed it right away. So in the future, let's not make snap judgments, you know, and change what has been the norm for years. I expected someone to come forward with a copy of their deed saying this was mentioned on their deed, but that didn't happen. So, but I just think we listened to a couple ratepayers to change things. Maybe we should have sat on it and let the other people have something to say. So to those people, I'm sorry that it happened to you. I think Mr. Sutherland brought up a good point. If we're going to say it's closed, you have to make some exceptions. There's no doubt about it. We can't, there has to be exceptions for safety, and as he mentioned, fire suppression. So I think it needs a little more thought than we've given it so far. But to those people that we got them upset, I'm sorry.
Madam Clerk, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to reiterate for committee's information that staff are taking all of the feedback that we received this evening, both through the public meeting as well as through the electronic survey, and creating a report with recommendations for council for further implementation. So as stated previously, we by no means made a decision this evening, and we'll take all of the feedback, both from committee as well as that of the public, and create recommendations for council at their meeting on June 9th.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Brittany. I'm not referring to any decisions this evening. I'm referring to decisions that were made in prior meetings. Maybe we made the decision a little too quickly, and in the future, let's sit on it and hear both sides of the story. Thank you.
I agree with your comments, Councillor Barfoot, and that's what I wanted to say is that we learn from our mistakes, and I think with an issue comes up like this, we should definitely ask for a meeting so we hear from everybody. So I think we learn from our mistakes. Moving forward, if there's no other unfinished business, down to new business, I see none. Is there any notice of motions from any council member here tonight? See none, we're down to our closed session. That the committee of the whole move into closed session at 7:10 with the CEO to discuss personal matters regarding identifiable individuals, including municipal or local board employees. Someone to move it to put it on the floor, please. A move by Councillor Thompson, second by Councillor Barfoot. Is there any discussion on the motion before us? Yeah, go ahead, Madam Clerk. I know you want to say something. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and for committee's information, as you will have heard the mayor say, the CAO will only be joining you in closed session this evening, so the motion has been amended to remove my participation. So prior to this meeting this evening, I provided written delegation of my authorities as clerk, provided to me by the Municipal Act to the Township CAO. As I said, I have delegated the authorities in writing further to Section 228(4) of the Municipal Act. These delegations of authorities and responsibilities will remain in effect throughout the duration of the closed meeting and culminate upon moving back into open session at the same meeting.
Madam Clerk, and you will take over after we come out of closed session.
That is correct.
Okay. Please take the vote, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just to confirm, the mover and the seconder are fine with the amendment, moving the clerk. I see shaking heads. Yes, thank you. So when I call your name, please indicate whether you are for or against the motion as amended. Councillor Carol Barfoot.
For.
Councillor Kathy Moore-Coburn.
For.
Councillor Paul Sutherland.
For.
Councillor Ryan Thompson.
For.
Councillor Grant Pringle.
For.
Deputy Mayor Sue Carlton.
For.
And Mayor Dwight Burley.
For.
Thank you, and that carries. And as a reminder to all of our members, please leave the open session meeting and join the closed session meeting. Okay, Mr. Mayor, we are now live. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We're in camera. We gave the CEO direction, just so
Okay,
you
Mr. Mayor,
know,
we are now
a show
live.
of hands
Please go
and
ahead.
all council agreed. Thank you, Madam. As far as I could see, just so you know, a little bit confusing. Committee went into closed session to discuss matters under open meeting exemption K of section 233 of the Municipal Act. As a result of closed discussion, the following actions were taken. Direction was provided to staff regarding recommendations and amendments to the existing township organizational structure and pay grid due to the recently completed organizational compensation review. Staff are preparing an open session report detailing said amendments and recommendations for consideration. Members are encouraged to review the report and submit any questions, register to participate with the clerk in public question period. So if that makes sense, I'll move on to our agenda.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, just for transparency purposes, you slightly cut off at the end there. So if I may, I will commence where you cut off.
By all means, go ahead.
Staff are preparing an open session report detailing said amendments and recommendations for consideration on May 12th. Members of the public are encouraged to review the report and submit any questions and register to participate with the clerk in public question period.
Thank you. Our next council meeting will be May 12th at 5 o'clock with committee meeting on May 19th at 5 o'clock. I will now ask for an adjournment of this meeting. Moved by Councilor Colburn, second by Councilor Barfoot. A show of hands, all agree to adjournment? Opposed? Everyone, okay, it's carried. Thanks, everybody. It's a long meeting. Appreciate it. Night.